I've been invited to tell you about my work, and a straightforward way of doing this will be to explain how these sculptures arrived here from conception to delivery. And I'll focus on these 5. After I learned how to make clay portraits, usually called busts, I knew I wanted to make something that reflected what goes on in my mind. This then easily grew into thinking about what goes on in all of our minds and how we all have many common thoughts. I really warmed to the idea that a piece of art might make someone feel less alone, and they might feel safer around the chaos of their own minds. This hope became my motivation, and I aimed for each head to signal we are not alone with our mad, horrible, and often intolerable thoughts. For me, lots of themes and concepts continually rattle around and agitate in my head. Ideas arrive randomly whenever they feel like it, and hopefully while I'm swimming, so I have a chance to hardwire them into my memory. They arrive fairly well formed, so vaguely doable, and I've imagined maybe 2 key elements, including a material. The idea will very often be based on an observation or experience of the human condition. For me, this potentially pretentious phrase is about human nature and how we're so often drawn towards protecting ourselves and therefore doing the wrong thing. Injustice is another strong source of ideas. For example, I can channel vitriol in a heartbeat towards the reported queues for CAMs or the dubious relationship with the truth our last 5 prime ministers have had. The list grows. I like the idea that an artwork has a job to do. Then once I have an idea, developing it is an unknown process. I've realised that if I know how I'm going to make something, I'm not truly creating anything. I'm just a rather inefficient factory line worker. I find not knowing fun. I feel full of potential and I'm excited, and I know this is going to be the best bit. A few ideas don't work out, but I'm pretty tenacious, and most will result in some form of sculpture. The process for these heads started with making a clay model of my head, and I did this in front of the mirror with a few side profile selfies, and I used calipers. I wanted a 3D shape that at the very least had the proportions of my head. From here, I made a silicone mould, and this is fun and suits my way of working. You don't need to measure anything, so there's no need to remember any numbers, and that's something that suits me. The correct amount of catalyst is judged by the shade of pink it turns white silicone. So you keep stirring away until you get the right pink. Then you know it will set soon. It's fun. The mould was then filled with good old-fashioned plaster of Paris. I recently came across a nice bit of trivia. Plaster of Paris is a naturally occurring material, and the best source is underneath the hill of Montmartre in Paris, hence the name. So there's lots of mixing and waiting for setting. I've had to learn, how to stop fiddling with things when they're just about to set and to give the material time. Impatience is destructive at this point. This project was great as I had several heads on the go simultaneously, so I was kept distracted. The plaster required a lot of sanding, which I did by hand, and it was a lengthy and tiring process. It made my arms ache. I've now bought myself a little mini electric sander called a mouse. But pre-mouse, when I got to the last plaster head, I was bored of sanding, and the tedium of sanding had given me time to think. I wondered if my ideas had become over earnest. Solution was joy above. It didn't need any more sanding. It was already a beautiful, white, snowy wedding cake of a mountain. And it was a lighter and less earnest idea. As soon as I worked this out, I loved it, almost as much as I loved being in the mountains themselves. Instantly, I was moving on and imagining and mixing the correct blue for the mountain sky. The reason I'm telling you this is that it's a good example of how creativity happens for me after the initial idea. There is no plan at all. It can happen instantly. And importantly, as in this case, the materials very often show me the way forward. I wanted the surface of each head to be different and to make sure one surface was smooth simplicity, so I could paint it in just one colour with no dents or shadows. A single colour can avoid complications and distractions and bring a single element into focus. In this case, this little chap. This piece is called Power. I chose black because of the obvious dark cloud that arrives when someone is frightened. I chose gloss rather than matte because it made the head look prouder. And I think people in power and often feel rather proud of themselves. I do think that we've all felt like this little person. At some point in our lives, we have all felt powerless and frightened. Talking about the powerless, over the years, the mentally ill have had their helplessness rammed home to them by the terrible way we have labelled them. I have a list. The poor sods have been called, among other things, prisoners, lunatics, bedlams, madmen, maniacs, exhibits, inmates, patients, guests, clients, and now, I believe, service users. I love this progression. I understand that an older generation and some lay people may feel bemused by the newest label, but as you know, words do matter, and old-fashioned connotations are a dangerous thing. They'll stifle progress and harbour negativity. So on to decision, another area that you as psychiatrists all know all too well. The number of suicides right on our doorsteps is horrifying and deeply shameful. It must be the ultimate state of loneliness. It's odd to call this one popular, but it is, sadly, which speaks volumes in itself. Mainly, I feel sad about this piece. It is thoroughly depressing that it's so topical and resonant. However, I'm pleased the art is airing the subject, which has got to be a good thing. And I'm pleased to take you on to something lighter. Green Monster. A silicone pump from a DIY shop produced perfect black globules, the Green Monster. I looked back at my sketchbook and found these random words I wanted to play with and try to manifest. Are you ready? Shiny, glistening, classy, snobby, haughty, green envy, black dress, green drips, black tears, rotten, filthy, ruining, stupid. I must have been having an interesting day. Most feedback has assumed Green Monster is about a woman, something that I'm keen to explore further as I talk to more viewers. And according to Age, feedback has been fascinating. The clue is this fine emerald ring, £1 from Argos. Depending on your age, it's about the car crash of a divorce or the stress of wanting to get married. I was thinking about periods of a woman's life when there is change afoot and insecurity is baked in. For example, when she's either engaged or moving house or grieving or pregnant. However, how I interpret it really isn't the point. What's this one about? Is a question I am most often asked, and I've gone some way to answer it in the booklet. But really, listen up, that's not the point. The point is how you interpret it. How do you feel when you look at it? What feelings are provoked in you? All this is your art to digest. Finally, head noise. I love this one, and it entertains me that I chopped its ears off. All the figures are opining about other people. In my sketchbook, I wrote in a repeating pattern, chat, 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 bitch, 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 chat, 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 casual, careless, gossip, 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 chat, chat, chat. And it went on and on in a curved shape. And I might well have been in a slightly tedious lecture. The absence of ears is an instruction. Stop listening. Shut them out. Banish them. We all have a chiding voice in our head that comes from somebody else, and they are rarely helpful. I've had personal experience of sitting in a psychiatrist's waiting room in silence with strangers, a mother and her teenager unable to speak to each other or even look at each other. It's a painful watch. The disdain for each other was palatable, and I so wanted to help them talk to each other. I felt very strongly, it does not need to be like this. Since that day, I've been commissioned to make another head noise for the same waiting room, and I will be delighted if it prompts a conversation or connection. I'd be absolutely thrilled if it helps anyone find words. Or maybe a mother might find her ears. Even in silence, I hope this piece might make someone, doctor or patient, feel less afraid of their own madness, to understand they're not alone and that others feel like this too. Onwards to the final stage of their journey. Once I'd made all 12, I was very quickly invited to show them in the atrium at the Institute of Psychiatry, King's College. And for that show, I produced the booklet that we have here, and it's been my calling card ever since. At King's, they have a footfall of about 200 people daily, and almost all are medics of the mind, a similar group to here at the Royal College of Psychiatrists. I am delighted with this demographic, people who I would like to encourage to look beyond textbooks and statistics and symptoms and imagine just how alone and frightened some of their patients might be feeling. And I'm speaking to you, the doctors, here as well. It's a frightening world out there, and nobody is immune. Anyone's mind can become disordered, patients and doctors. Ultimately, I wanted to make people think that mental health problems do not have to be scary, solitary experiences, and that others are in the same boat too. And I'm honoured to have been given the opportunity, and I feel honoured that you've listened today. Thank you.